In an oral culture, the word itself is seen to have enormous power, including powers of creation, to make things real, to put an objective face on the imagination and share one's musings publicly. This is reflected in all the origin stories of many human religions that have eventually moved beyond their oral roots and transitioned into textual religions. Words not only evoke, that is to say, call to mind the things they represent. In an oral culture, they also invoke them. They call upon them. And so in many oral cultures, and again, this has survived into many textual religions, God remains nameless and unapproachable, mysterious and ineffable. And it is a sign of human vanity or hubris to presume to speak the holy name. Oral culture, bottom line, is a culture of immanent transcendence, the combining of these two experiences. Some iteration of monistic pantheism reigned, linking the natural world with the supernatural, and seeing divinity in all of nature. Animism and pantheism are just two belief systems common to oral cultures that meld the spiritual with the material, that see a spiritual world as residing inherently in the natural world. Oral folk feel surrounded by the sacred, live amid the mystical. Magic, spirits, and the supernatural abound. The mysteries of life that could be partly expressed by abstract, symbolic speech were too deep for the oral mind to investigate analytically and logically. That had to wait for writing and its offspring, natural philosophy and theology. But those mysteries were everywhere evident, and it is in speech itself that much of that magic dwelt. For oral folk, words are indeed magic, and the magic comes not just from their creative power, but from their ethereal nature. Words have, as I said, an evanescent quality, missing from physical objects that occupy a distinct physical position in space and time. In this way, words are a sensual link between the worlds of immanence and transcendence. But orality, a conserving mindset, one that is quite resistant to change, must eventually fall to human curiosity and ingenuity, and it did. In the space of a little over a millennium, from 2000 BC until about 800 BC, human beings across the world, the populated world, responded to a curious urge to externalize their thoughts in writing. It is, in fact, fascinating to note that the evolution of human culture finds all human development of writing situated roughly in this era. It's beyond the scope of this presentation tonight to attempt a comprehensive survey of the evolution of writing forms, and frankly, it's a little boring. So instead, I'll talk about the psychic, structural, and we now know neurological effects of writing. Psychologically, writing externalizes thought, as speech does, but does so in fixed space. The visual capture of the elusive word on the page reifies thought, making the public utterance, or as McLuhan said, outerance of thought, not an ethereal event as in oral culture, but an object, thought as an object. It transfers the locus of outer thought from an evanescent moment in time to the semi-permanent world of space. It shifts, at least temporarily, the sensory focus of thought from the ear to the eye, and we begin to become aware of the linearity of thought because of the linearity of writing, the logic of thought because of the inherent logic of linguistic grammar, and the sequential nature of thought because of the sequential nature of linguistic syntax as opposed to the simultaneity of the oral experience. At the same time, writing reinforces the interiority of speech by allowing, or perhaps forcing, the reflective consideration and reconsideration of thoughts on the basis of their linearity, their logic, and their cause-effect sequence. Marshall McLuhan suggests that, quote, the translation of auditory into visual terms set up an inner life in man which separated him from the exterior world and in part from his own senses, as we now know from the study of pre-literate societies. End of that quote. The systematic recording of changing objective data undermines superstitious tendencies and ultimately work to undermine our faith in the immanent nature of transcendent otherworldly realities by allowing us to identify patterns within phenomena and to make predictions based on that data. Thus, literacy helps to create the skeptical mind, or gives the already nascent skeptical mind an outlet, and deals a blow to transcendent experience. Scientific thought without writing is possible on the individual level, but science as a cultural activity without writing is not. But I'll go even one step further by saying that with the advent of writing, science becomes an inevitability. Now, you've heard me use once or twice already, and those of you who in Dr. Shushard's class are probably well aware of these phrases, propositionally structured and presentationally structured information. You might remember that I explained that propositionally structured information is that which is contained in words, the product of the human capacity for speech, and that presentationally structured information is all information that is not codified in words. Still and moving images, nonverbal behaviors, sounds, music, movement, paralinguistic cues. I need at this moment to point out something that my research confirmed for me, that there are indeed measurable qualitative differences in neurological functions when we read as opposed to almost any other sensory activity. Within the last 10 to 15 years, a series of studies using fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging technologies, have indicated that different regions of the brain are active when viewing visual media or listening to music or playing video games than are at work when reading. Other studies indicate that neural activity associated with the specific act of reading is concentrated in the left hemisphere, specifically in two areas of the brain called Broca's and Wernicke's areas, the areas associated with the production and the interpretation of words. The left angular gyrus, which translates written words into a sort of an interior monologue, and the arcuate fascisculus. Am I surprised I got that one out? The area that links sensory input to Broca's and Wernicke's areas. Presentational thought, we must remember, takes place without the intermediation of words. It occurs in specific portions of the brain located either on the right hemisphere or in the pre-mammalian and reptilian portions of the brain, areas otherwise associated with emotion, intuition, instinct, and immediacy. It is innate presentational thought and natural, requiring no curriculum and no prerequisite skills. We're born thinking presentationally, and there's no way to avoid it. Propositional thought, on the other hand, is thinking through, with, and in words. Its speech-specific processes occur in a specific portion of the brain, the temporal and frontal lobes of the left hemisphere and neocortex, an area already associated with reason, logic, and sequential thought. It is unnatural, which is to say, we're not born speaking. We're born with the capacity to speak, but without speaking. And so it needs to be learned, necessitating a curriculum that consists of learning a structured hierarchy of skills, from babbling, through learning simple and then more complex words, through attempts at stringing words together to make meaningful sentences, and through an even more complex set of skills, including the development of patience and fine motor skills, before we can move on to the next step, written propositional codes. And finally, in the absence of propositionally structured stimulus, we can all too easily avoid propositional